Greetings, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Anime Octopus. Today's fanfic discussion centers on, what if Naruko pretended to be weak? Part 2. Disclaimer, the content on this channel is intended for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Let's begin. Hokage Tower, a week after Team 7's return. Following the conclusion of the meeting between the Konoha councils and the Hokage, Tsunade walked back to her office with Kakashi trailing behind her. She sighed, trying to alleviate the headache she had acquired from the relentless complaints of Sakura Haruno's mother about the brutality her daughter allegedly endured at the hands of the demon. I must find a way to disarm their vocal cords. I can't believe those fools want me to list Naruko in the bingo book as a missing nin simply for defending herself against aggressors, Tsunade remarked, rubbing her temples as she opened the door, contemplating the sake she planned to drown her sorrows in once she discovered its hiding place, courtesy of Shizune, in an hour. Though, I am astonished she managed to fend off 2 cage-level Sharingan users, defeat an Anbu and a Chunin, and still elude you, thanks to Shibuki's interference. Kakashi silently followed Tsunade into the room, closing the door behind him after Tsunade dismissed everyone except a purple-haired Anbu operative in a Nico mask. He was still exhausted from their mission and the arduous journey across the elemental nations. "All right, Kakashi," Tsunade began from behind her desk as she activated a privacy seal, her fingers interlaced in front of her face while Nico positioned herself by the window, keeping a vigilant eye on the room. "I know you omitted several details in your report to the councils, but given the letter I received from Shibuki describing a team of Konoha ninja assaulting a highly honored guest and damaging the property of the Nanabe Jinchuriki, I need some answers." It might have been wise to adopt a more diplomatic approach, Nico reprimanded her former senpai, masking the barrier breach where Jiraiya was eavesdropping. "Negotiation was never an option once she sensed our presence," Kakashi sighed, recalling Naruko's threats to bury them. She was explicit in warning us not to make any moves and seemed particularly aggravated by Sasuke and Sakura due to the Chidori incident and rib-kicking from 6 years ago. She harbors a profound animosity towards all Konoha ninja. "How severe is it?" Tsunade inquired as she searched for the sake Shizune had hidden once again. "Severe enough that she threatened to cripple us or worse if we didn't leave her alone. Naruko has mastered Kushina's chakra chains, evident from the way she made me relive my Kushina Piñata experience alongside Sasuke," Kakashi said, wincing at the phantom pain of being repeatedly slammed into the ground. Jiraiya, eavesdropping, flinched at the memory of his own experience when caught peeping on Naruko and Sumei Inuzuka. Additionally, her chakra control is exceptional, allowing her to create constructs like the massive blade she formed around her sword. She employed 3 distinct chakra natures with her weapon, including fire, lightning, and wind. Kakashi recounted how Naruko had effortlessly defeated her 4 opponents, even when they were employing their most powerful techniques. Tsunade and Nico were astounded upon learning that the young blonde had somehow mastered the legendary Sanin's super strength from scratch and used it to overpower her adversaries. Jiraiya, visibly shaken, nearly lost his balance as he had a waking nightmare about another Tsunade. "If you had informed the council about her mastery of these techniques, they would have undoubtedly been alarmed," Tsunade remarked, massaging her temples. She knew that the elders would be eager to capture Naruko for her abilities, particularly since Sai had revealed that Danzo was assembling a force to retrieve the Jinchuriki if necessary. "We must brief the retrieval team on her capabilities, but this is troubling. Not only does she possess my strength and Kushina's chakra chains, but as an Uzumaki and a Jinchuriki, she is a formidable force. Additionally, her male companion wields a technique akin to the Hiraishin, and there is an unknown girl with them. They have disappeared without a trace, and we must wait for them to resurface before making any moves." "Hokage-sama," Nico interjected from her post, capturing their attention. "Naruko is likely happier outside the village with her friends. If we attempt to forcibly bring her back to a village that has exploited and mistreated her, she will not be merciful, as she demonstrated when her former team confronted her in Waterfall. She defeated 2 near cage-level Sharingan users, a Chunin with fragments of your strength, and an Onbu specializing in seals. Moreover, if she learns that Kushina is her mother and that she was abandoned to a life of ostracism, she might enter a tailed state, significantly amplifying her already considerable power. And may the gods help us if she discovers the truth about Kushina, Tsunade murmured, recalling the look of terror mixed with a hint of pride on Kushina's face in the council chambers upon hearing how her daughter had overpowered her former team. Tsunade sighed, placing her fingers against her temples in contemplation. This situation transcended a mere headache. Kakashi, collaborate with Jiraiya to compile a comprehensive dossier on the Akatsuki. Ensure this information is ready to be distributed to all other Kages before we dispatch the team to retrieve Naruko, Tsunade commanded, rising from her seat and pressing her knuckles against the desk. It is imperative that everyone is aware of the threat posed by this organization and their pursuit of Jinchuriki. What should we tell the team, Hokage-sama? Nico inquired as she resumed her post, sensing the approach of Kushina and other council members. I will brief them once they return from their missions. Team Konohamaru is currently engaged in combat with a bandit group led by Kushimaru of the Seven Swordsmen, Tsunade explained, eliciting startled reactions from Kakashi and Nico. I have already dispatched Guy to handle the situation. You are dismissed, I have several pressing matters to address. The two ninjas acknowledged their leader's orders as the barrier fell. Kakashi exited through the window, joining Jiraiya, while Nico melded back into the shadows, signaling her squad to reassemble. Later that night. You're joking, right? Asuma exclaimed, his cigarette slipping from his lips. He, Anko, and Kurenai sat in disbelief at Ichiraku Ramen, processing the news Kakashi had shared. Your former student defeated you and your team effortlessly? Without using ninjutsu or chakra? Kurenai asked incredulously. She found it hard to believe that someone reputed to be a dead last could overpower two near-cage-level ninjas and their support team. If it were a joke, it was certainly a terrifying one. Until Shibuki and his wife found us with a platoon of Taki ninja, Kakashi recounted wearily, still recovering from the intense battle and arduous journey back to the village. She utilized some form of Fuinjutsu to redirect Sasuke's lightning-style attacks and demonstrated exceptional chakra control. She could form a large blade of pure chakra around her sword, similar to how you enhance your knives, Asuma. That's impressive. Asuma remarked with a whistle. Achieving that level of control required extensive training, and he certainly did not possess as much chakra as an Uzumaki or a Jinchuriki. Weren't her hands sealed to prevent the use of ninjutsu and chakra? Kurenai queried, recalling the seals Yu Gao had mentioned placing on the young girl's hands. No, it just stops her from using the hand seals needed for ninjutsu and genjutsu, Kakashi said. Though, not all jutsu requires seals and chakra control doesn't need them either. Plus, she has gotten better with taijutsu and kenjutsu, and though her chakra reserves are naturally massive from being an Uzumaki and the augmentation of being the Jinchuriki of the fox, she has excellent chakra control from what I experienced with her chains when she used me and Sasuke like piñatas and that large sword blade that we didn't get to see the outcome of. Asuma, Anko and I may be able to beat her in a ninjutsu match, but she has a lot more chakra than either of us do. You, Kurenai, definitely have her beat with genjutsu since that was always her worst field when she was still here, but she has the QB to get her out of it. Guy will definitely have more experience and power with taijutsu, but Naruko fights with seals and weapons that can offset his prowess. Her use with seals allowed her to snatch Sasuke's Chidori needles out of the air with a swipe of her sword and send them right back at us, and I bet that's just barely scratching the surface since it seems she already knows of her Uzumaki heritage. Are we really having this much trouble against a girl who used to run around in a neon orange jumpsuit painting the Hokage monument and fling out clones in a fight like crazy? Anko asked as she looked around at the people around her. She's a bit darker and angrier, most likely due to all the crap this village has given her, but all in all she is the same person, Kakashi confirmed. Except for the fact that she is a lot more serious and powerful than she used to be. I believe that she was holding back in order for Shibuki and his forces to arrive, not kill us. Kakashi said as he took a bite of the ramen sitting in front of him, trying to understand what Naruko and her Uzumaki family members saw in this. Especially since I doubt she wants to be in the bingo book, though she'd be in the right for defending herself. The mission to bring her back is to be taken with the utmost seriousness and caution, even though most of our top ninja are a part of said team. Anko and Asuma nodded as Kurenai tried to wrap her pretty black head around it, and they all stood leaving money on the bar as Asuma took Kurenai back to his place where they'd keep Konohamaru up for yet another sleepless night. Kakashi sighed as he was left alone when Anko saw Iruka and ran over to him. He rubbed his tired eyes and decided to walk back to his apartment, not noticing a red-haired male Anbu wearing a fox mask leaving the roof behind the ramen shop to go tell a certain Uzumaki councilwoman what had transpired in the meeting between the four jounin. Sunagakur, 3 days after Team 7 returned. Wings of clay flew and dived through the starlit desert sky, avoiding waves and massive hands of sand that soared through the air in an attempt to crush the unnatural creature that flew above the village hidden in sand. Black ringed eyes narrowed in an annoyed expression from where their owner stood on a floating blob of sand, as smaller clay birds were released from a blond long-haired man wearing an Akatsuki cloak and as he raised yet another giant claw of sand to swat the annoyance out of his skies. Not bad, Ichibi-san. Datara, a missing nin of Iwa, said with a crazed smile gracing his face as yet another one of his creations exploded brightly against the Kazekage's shield of sand. A colossal amount of the cage/Jinchuriki's sand moved all around him in the form of a giant orb in order to imprison him from all sides, but fortunately for the blast-style user a large clay bird swooped in and saved him just before the exit closed. That was pretty close, Godime-san. You won't be leaving Suna alive, Gaara said in a monotone voice as his older brother Kankuro gathered his forces beneath their fight in an attempt to snare the flying missing nin, his older sister currently in Kumo making an open-door alliance treaty for the two villages. Sand formed before him and quickly fired bullets of highly condensed sand at the enemy. Digital shrapnel. The hardened sand flew towards the clay bird that exploded on impact while Datara safely leapt onto another, frowning as he saw how little clay he had left in his pouches. The city quickly became a massive maze of obstacles as they flew around each other, trying to catch the other in their traps. The massive exchange of bombs and sand woke the sleeping residents who in an awestruck stupor, witnessed the massive sky battle between their beloved leader and the red cloud-wearing intruder. You're pretty good, Datara mused as he formed the rest of his clay into figurine with a bit of sweat running down his face. He hadn't had this workout since Oonoki tried to kill him. But this is it, Ichibi-san. For you and this entire village. The clay figure quickly quadrupled its size and as Datara let it go, it plummeted to the village beneath them, sending the Suna shinobi into a frenzy. Gaara's eyes widened at the enemy's cowardly tactic and then steeled themselves as he summoned a great amount of his chakra. Sky Sand Defensive Wall. He roared. Towers of sand rose at the beckoning of the true lord of the desert surrounding them, the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi no Tanuki. It spread itself like a great wave in the sky and caught the incendiary device, causing it to detonate and light up the entire night sky in a bright flash of light. Gaara gasped from the exertion of raising such a massive amount of sand and leaned forward with his hands on his knees to regain his energy. Blocking that is really amazing and scary, Datara commented with a psychotic smirk engulfing his face, and Gaara turned his head to give his opponent his infamous raccoon glare. Datara looked up as a massive shadow blocked out the light of the moon, making the famous bomber gasp as he saw the massive encampment of sand surround him looking like the arms of the Ichibi no Shukaku. Shit. Great Tanuki Sand Prison. Gaara announced, and the sphere of sand sealed itself around the mad bomber of Iwa. Katsu. Datara's voice echoed and the bird he was standing on exploded just as he leapt away from it, leaving a large hole in the prison of sand for him to fall through. As he made his way to the earth beneath them and sand tendrils rained from above, the mouth on the left hand spit of a certain figure and filled it with chakra. A plume of smoke gave way to another bird and he landed on it in a crouch as they pulled away, making Datara tch now that the last of his clay was gone. As he turned to smirk tauntingly at the Kazekage, the sand of the desert erupted upwards and roared as the head of Shukaku took form in an attempt to devour him and join his crushed body to the endless sands of the desert. Whoa! He muttered, relatively impressed before he took off, the following blast of wind from the raccoon's mouth barely missing his ride. Datara smirked and ripped off a few pieces of clay from his ride and launched several high-speed birds at the insomniac, forcing him to cover himself with his sand shield in order to not be blown up in the resulting explosion. It seems that in the end, victory is mine. Datara roared, making Gaara's eyes widen as he saw a tiny clay creature crawling through his sand. Before he could mutter a word or summon his sand to perform his sand armor jutsu to protect himself, the spiders exploded and the blast forced the sand orb to expand in different spots. The sand fell away as Gaara fell from his position in the air with the scent of charred flesh showing from the numerous burns layered over his body. The sand armor that managed to protect parts of his body were cracked and exposed. Burnt, raw skin showed from beneath. "Looks like I win, Ichibi-san." Datara hummed happily as he approached the fallen Jinchuriki, his arm bleeding from where it had been snagged by some sand. "That took some doing. Mixing detonating clay in the sand around you. You weren't giving me any openings, either. You're as tough as I figured, Kazekage," he said as his psychopathic grin grew wider while he grabbed his bird and reformed it into something that could fly and carry his quarry at the same time. "Now I get take you someplace fun." Next day, border between waterfall and iron. Naruko laughed as she watched Tuya smack Renji repeatedly over the head with a wooden tray for messing with her beloved flute. The blonde's heartless abode couldn't bring itself to tell the fiery redhead that Shaolin was the one that was responsible for dipping the chakra metal instrument in the can of bean paste. They had met up with the former Auto 4 member the day before and had learned about the several Konoha teams that had been going around and talking to other villages about her. She especially liked the part she heard about how Ebisu had been nut-checked by her friend Samui and Kumo when he tried to cope a feel with her friend that rivaled Tsunade in the tit department. Suddenly, the blonde Uzumaki stood straight up, dropping her unfinished stick of dango back down onto the plate, making her three companions look at her. "What is it?" Tuya asked as she saw her friend concentrate on something in the distance. "The seal I put on Gaara in case his life was in danger just went off." Everyone's eyes widened then narrowed at the mention of somebody going after their friend. Renji nodded to Naruko when she looked at him and grabbed her shoulder. "We will be back later. If B and Yugito-senpai get here before then, tell them what happened." As she and the brown-haired boy disappeared, she saw Shaolin and Tuya nod their heads. 6 hours later, River Country. Near the border between Wind and Rain Country, two figures could be seen moving at a casual pace with a large bird of clay floating behind them with something in its tail. Looking closely, you could see that the person wrapped up in its tail was the unconscious form of Gaara no Sabaku, the god Kazekage, who was covered in bruises and leaking sand everywhere. "We should be near the chosen place soon, Datara said as he rubbed his sore shoulder where his arm had almost been ripped out of its socket by the clay and sand battle 2 days ago. His hunchbacked companion merely gave a grunt in response. He was annoyed with the fact that Datara showboating had made them late in meeting up with the others. Hell, not even Kisame made him late when they were partners and he loved killing. "Come on, Sasori-sama. It's not my fault that the Jinchuriki was so skilled with that sand of his, Datara whined as he got tired of the silent treatment his partner was giving him. He didn't like silent situations, always being the explosive talker. "You got cocky and didn't bring enough clay with you because you thought he'd be easy to beat, just because he was only the Ichibi." Sasori snapped, he so didn't like to make people wait. The two continued walking for several more minutes, having gone back to a comfortable silence, one that was awkward for Datara. But it was broken when a roaring noise came from behind them. The two Akatsuki members jumped away and spun in midair with Sasori just barely dodging the large blast of fire that came from behind him. "Where the hell did that come from?" the puppeteer snapped as he looked around to find their attacker. "So there was someone else besides that weird geisha boy following us." Datara mumbled to himself as he shifted his attention to the wide scorch mark scarring the ground below him. "What the?" Sasori thought as he looked up when the ground darkened just in time to move out of the way of a falling blonde that still managed to slice off one of his wooden arms with her large sword. Datara was saved from another attacker as a white metal scorpion-shaped tail lunged towards them, making a brown-haired boy miss with what appeared to be a rod of light that would have surely taken off the Akatsuki member's head. The two attackers leapt away from their opponents and landed across from the Akatsuki members. "Damn," Renji said as he released the chakra he was using to make the rod. "I was hoping that we could finish you both off quickly with that attack. I guess that was just wishful thinking." How troublesome. Somewhere in Konoha in the Land of Stone, a certain Nara and his father sneezed at the same time. Hey Sasori-sama, isn't that? Datara asked as he pulled his ruined hat from his head. Yeah. Sasori said as his hat also came off, revealing his grotesque head. Sticking out from the back of his cloak was the scorpion tail. Naruko Uzumaki, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki that has been missing for a while. Naruko didn't even look affected by the puppeteer's words as she held her sword up, smirking as she sent chakra to the seals she was able to place on Sasori's cloak, ready to activate them should she have need to. You guys have two choices. Datara and his partner raised their eyebrows at the declaration. Give me Gaara now and I'll give you a quick death that may or may not be painful for you or, she said as her aura darkened and the two S-class missing nins shivered as they saw the outline of a massive nine-tailed fox behind her, snarling. I take Gaara back from you by force and give you both a very painful death. Choose wisely, dipshits. Wind release, rending wind blade. Naruko snarled as she got tired of the staring match between them and launched a massive blast of wind towards the two missing nin with a swing of her sword. The two gasped as they dodged, their eyes bugging out at the sight of the massive scar carved into the ground and forest around them from the attack. Datara was torn from his musing of the attack by Renji appearing behind him with what appeared to be a seal of Fuin Jutsu in midair that fired a blast of lightning at him at point-blank range. Sasori whipped his head around as he heard Datara scream in pain as he managed to dodge with the exception of his arm that blown off by the attack, before he too was forced to dodge as Naruko appeared in front of him in mid-swing. Fast, Sasori thought as he dodged only for the blonde to appear next to him with her sword cleaving off the remainder of his damaged arm. Sasori managed to surprisingly jump away from her next swing with such a heavy body. The former Suna Anbu launched his scorpion tail at Naruko, trying to impale her while he launched Senbone from his left hand. Naruko just smirked as she leapt over the tail and much to his shock, added fire chakra to her blade and slicing through his tail with ease, making the lump of connected metal plates fall to the ground. The cloth covering his mouth ripped apart, revealing Sasori's odd mouth as it fired a barrage of senbons from it at the girl while he watched Datara play keep the Kazekage away from the enemy with his opponent. Naruko simply twirled her sword and swatted the needles out of the air before launching a blast of fire from her sword that slammed right into Sasori's body, exploding into multiple flying pieces of burning wood and superheated metal. Naruko just stared impassively when she saw a cloaked person jump away from the mangled mess. I see, so the rumors are true, Naruko said as she stared at the remains of the puppet she just slashed. You do hide inside a puppet to defeat the weakness of all puppet masters. Sasori just smirked and pulled off his cloak revealing a young boy with wide grayish-brown eyes and short, mousy red hair. Naruko raised her eyebrow as she noticed that it seemed that the man before her had turned himself into a puppet, if the interlocking parts and the hole where his stomach should be were anything to go by. He had a pair of spinning claws attached to his lower back, with something that looked like a scroll holder melded into his back while there was a long length of coiled wire inside his stomach cavity that had a barbed point at the end. In the left pictorial, he had something that looked very similar to flesh that had the kanji for scorpion on it. The two were taken out of their staring contest when an explosion filled the air and they looked over at their comrades to see that their fight had ended. It appeared that Datara had attached some exploding clay to Renji's bow staff, and the brown-haired 19-year-old had pushed it right back at Datara by stabbing it into his stomach via teleporting to the Fuin Jutsu seal he had left on him, causing the mad bomber of Iwa to go out in a bang, dying in his early 20s. Damn it! Sasori snarled as he pulled out a scroll and showed the kanji for Shodanime imprinted in it when he unrolled it with a flourish. Smoke appeared and when it dispersed it revealed a puppet that had the appearance of a young man in his mid-20s that was a foot taller than Sasori. It had black spiky hair that was done in a top knot in the back and yellow eyes, it wore a dark brown cloak with a fur collar. Why does that face look so familiar? Renji asked himself as he studied the puppet. He recalled seeing a statue of an important person in Sunagakure that looked similar to Sasori's puppet when he had last visited when Naruko introduced him and Shaolin to Gaara. That is the missing Sandaime Kazekage, Naruko said calmly as she heard her friend's question. She had been shown the statues of the previous Kazekages and told their histories by old lady Chio at Gaara's request of a tour. I see that you figured it out, Sasori said calmly with a maniacal smirk on his face as he took enjoyment from showing off his most prized possession. This is the Sandaime Kazekage. He is one of my most favorite puppets because of how much trouble it took to capture him alive. Naruko grunted as she secretly added wind chakra to her blade. Naruko jumped towards Sasori at an incredible speed as the puppet user was forced to dodge Renji when the brunette appeared out of nowhere beside him with a newly formed rod of light. Sasori reacted accordingly, making the Kazekage puppet lift its arms and several compartments opened. Suddenly thousands of arms launched out of the wrists with blades and other assortments attached to them. Secret puppet art, thousand hands manipulation. Naruko sneered as she saw the attack and brought her sword up in a slashing motion, much to the puppet master's confusion. Don't think you can take me down that easily. With that said, she unleashed the wind that had been formed on the blade of her sword, slicing through the massive crowd of hands. Kazekage style, iron sand needles. Sasori shouted as black sand burst out from the puppet's mouth and took the form of razor-sharp needles that flew about in an attempt to impale its victims. Shit! Renji cried as he dodged his own attacking sand, noticing that the surface of it was a bit more glossy than iron should be. It must be poisoned. Looking over at Naruko, he got a nod of confirmation as she was scrapped by a tendril, with Kyubi burning up the poison instantly. Acting quickly, she fired several chakra chains from her back, aiming to capture the two human puppets. Sasori's eyes widened when he saw the chains and he dodged the first one that tried to ensnare him, only for his favorite puppet of the Kazekage to be snatched from his grasp and crushed under three of the chain's titanium grips, freeing the Sandaime from his grotesque fate. That's the Uzumaki clan's adamantine chains. That confirms that her name isn't just for show. The puppeteer thought as he leapt back to try and glean information of the two of them, though I wonder why Konoha would toss out the last member of one of their founding clans. You did remarkably well in dodging the iron sand and destroying the Kazekage, Sasori said as he did some quick hand signs and opened the right side of his chest that launched several chakra strings, while he used his left hand to grab one of the scrolls on his back. Secret technique of the Red Scorpion, performance of 100 puppets. Sasori said to himself as he unraveled the scroll and released hundreds of puppets from it, all of them armed with weapons and wearing red cloaks. Then all of the chakra strings that were released attached to the puppets and held them in mid-air. The last time I used this technique was when I destroyed a small nation. The puppeteer said as he glared a little hatefully at the two that had ruined his day. It had taken so much effort to get that damn puppet. Then all of the puppets launched forward, heading straight for Naruko, while three split off to engage Renji so he couldn't aid his comrade. While they were a bit taken back at the number of puppets that Sasori was able to control at once, Naruko raised her hand with her palm facing up and formed one of her signature techniques in it and forced it to become bigger and bigger. Udama Rasengan. She shouted as she jumped forward and slammed the massive orb of chakra into several of the puppets rushing at her, destroying them instantly much to the puppet user's shock. Smirking at the audible shock on the puppeteer's face, Naruko cut down several more puppets with her sword in what appeared to be a deadly, yet beautiful dance of death and steel. Renji soon joined her as he roasted one of the puppets while smashing the other two with his bow staff. Both of them joined together and began rushing towards the former man. Sasori, however, used his remaining puppets to surround the blonde and her friend as they dove in for the kill. But once again Sasori was thwarted by Renji as he used the Earth Spear Jutsu to impale the ones in their way as 20 chains flew from Naruko's back, crushing the puppets they grabbed. She aimed her sword for the flesh-like object in Sasori's chest, where the puppeteer's only link to the mortal world was housed. Sasori tried to move out of the way of the stab, only for more earth spears to impale his legs and lower back via Renji, who at the moment was aiming to take his head off with his bow staff. Naruko let out a yell as she drove the broad blade through Sasori's chest. Sasori smiled as he stared at the blonde 19-year-old before him. Well played, Uzumaki-san. And with that said, Sasori of the Red Sand, one of Suna's most notorious missing nin, passed away from this world with the light leaving his puppet eyes, and the only puppets left standing crumpled to the ground. Naruto stood calmly as she pulled her sword out of the man's chest cavity, before she grabbed the damaged core of flesh and placed it inside a scroll along with the torn-up puppet body of Sasori. Well, that was fun, Renji said as he imagined being able to fall asleep now while they walked over to Gaara's unconscious form. Naruko smirked as she hit her friend on the arm before she knelt down and grasped the Kazekage's arm. Yes, it was. Now let's get Gaara-kun back to Suna and his fiancée. Sunagakure Hospital Room 322. Hey Gaara-kun. Naruko said with a nervous wave from where she sat in a chair on the left side of the Kazekage's bed, her companion Renji asleep on the bed closest to the door. Naruko Uzumaki, Gaara said in a monotone voice as he looked up at the armored blonde from his sickbed, said blonde having been dragged away from lunch with Tamari, Kankuro and Kankuro's newest girlfriend, Sakimuto, by the man's Anbu. Imagine my surprise when I woke up an hour ago from my encounter with the men that attacked my village to find Baki telling me that you were the one to save me from and kill my captors. Gaara's mad. Shit. Naruko thought as she smiled nervously. I have a fairly good reason for not telling you where I was for the past 4 years, Gaara-kun. Please don't kill me. Explain, Gaara said as he turned his impassive stare at his old friend, the girl shivering under the weight. Well, you see. Naruko said as she wished her fellow Jinchuriki was as accepting as Fu. I was nearly caught after we met last time by a team of Kuza shinobi that were working with a team of Konoha Jounin to hunt down Orochimaru, and I decided to go into hiding for a bit before traveling again. After that, I saved Shaolin-chan and Renji and took them in. Gaara nodded at the girl as he moved to stand from his bed and pulled on his usual clothes, seeing the reasoning behind the girl's words. So, tell me about the past 4 years. He said, as he motioned for her to follow him, his Jinchuriki healing kicking in. As they walked, the blonde would tell him all of the semi-adventures she had, even her trip to Uzushio to find out about her ancestors and how she ran into Kakashi and a team of Konoha ninja while escorting Tazuna, then on to Taki where she ran into her old team and how she beat the crap out of them. After a while, she even made the sand user open up about how he had been, especially his engagement to his girlfriend Matsuri and Kankuro's 7 girlfriends in the last year. I see. Gaara said as they reached his office, his fellow Jinchuriki informing him that she was meeting up with Killer Bee and Yugito to prepare for the inevitable clash. He doubted he could convince the girl to rejoin Konoha to stop their annoying calls at this point in time. Seriously, he felt like crushing the next messenger Konoha sent for either the treaty or to locate Naruko. While I am annoyed that you didn't seek out my assistance or my offer of asylum, I understand. Regardless, you will be gracing Suna with your presence whenever you find yourself in the land of wind, no matter who is involved. She could just tell that it was a command. That works for me, Naruko said with a smile directed at the youngest Kage. I had better go wake Renji up. We need to get back to Tuya and Shaolin. B-senpai and Yugito-senpai is probably already there. All she received was a nod from the insomniac 19-year-old as he went to sit behind his desk and begin working on his remarkably small stack of paperwork. Sometimes being an insomniac had its merits. All Kages past and present would be jealous. 30 miles away from Suna Konohamaru's side from where he was leaning against the outside of the cave, he and his team had stopped it for the night, staring out at the endless desert before him that just seemed to want to swallow up anything in its grasp. Not knowing that it did sometimes if Gaara was in a bad mood. In the cave behind him were his teammates Udon and Moigi, and their sad excuse of a sensei Ebisu, the closet pervert fast asleep, dead tired from the pace his students had set, the 3 16-year-old Chunin already much stronger than the supposed great Jounin. Tsunade had given his team the mission to rescue the Kazekage after getting information from one of their contacts that the Akatsuki had kidnapped the young man while attacking the village, and while they were at it, try and locate Naruko as well, having lost track of her after Taki due to how long it took for Kakashi and his team to get back with their injuries. While they were only a little bit away from the village hidden in sand, Ebisu had felt it to be best that they rest to be ready for anything. After all, they were to fight S-class shinobi, and while his 3 students were strong, they would need all the help they could get. The 3 members of the original Konohamaru Corps hoping that they ran into their old boss on this mission, so they could try to bring her home. Of course, Konohamaru wasn't a naive fool like many of the Konoha 12 to believe that the girl would come back anytime soon willingly, or that she would be the same person they had all loved, especially after the sheer number of people he pranked for their biased hatred of his boss and hearing about how she had completely demolished her old team when they went after her. He wouldn't blame her if the reason she attacked was size insults, but he bet that it was that and Sakura's bitching. If it wasn't for the Akatsuki hunting Jinchuriki business, he would have just left her to do her own thing, but he didn't want the bastards killing the first person to see him as just Konohamaru just because they wanted power. That and he kind of wanted to see her decimate Kushina and her son Menma, the girl's twin. Kenji, however, was alright in his book. Having not insulted his wayward sister once because of their mother's mistakes and honestly trying to get to know what she was like before her banishment. The young Sarutobi heir sighed before turning around to tap out the night watch with Udon, before lying down in his own sleeping bag and dreaming of the naughty things he and Hanabi had been doing together recently. Who knew the publicly strict Hyuga heirs could be so damn kinky? Kazekage Mansion. Next day Naruko sighed in pleasure as she sank down into the water of the large bath next to Tamari, her bruises of sparring with Renji and Tamari feeling better already as the hot water and Kurama's chakra healed them. She almost sighed in disappointment about having to leave later today. She smirked over at Gaara's sister as she splashed her a bit, making the sand kunoichi glare at her before splashing her back, and they got into a water-slash-cat fight that had squeals and eeps escaping as they ended up touching inappropriate places, making Kankuro, who was on the other side of the fence, have a nosebleed as he imagined what they were doing over there. Outside Suna. Team Konohamaru had finally arrived. An annoyed Moigi carrying their dehydrated sensei. Ebisu and Team Konohamaru, Gaara said as he looked at the dehydrated perverted jounin when they arrived in his office, the team surprised that he wasn't in the hands of Akatsuki. Why are you here? We had heard that you had been kidnapped by Akatsuki, sir, Ebisu said as he felt like crumbling under the insomniac's piercing gaze. Tsunade-sama sent us here to help rescue you. Gaara for some reason wasn't surprised at all that Konoha knew about his kidnapping. That is rather interesting, but we were able to drive them off by ourselves, Ebisu-san. I've already sent the remains of one back to Iwa, and Sasori of the Red Sand has already been buried in his grandmother's backyard with his parents. Ebisu just stood in place silently. They had arrived too late, it would seem. I ended up being saved by a passing shinobi after I was captured, Gaara said as he glared at them, really wishing he could just use his sand like he intended earlier, but he didn't want a war breaking out because he had killed a team of Konoha ninja. No matter how tempting. This person didn't have any ulterior motives when it came to helping me, and he is held in high honors here for it, unlike Konoha. The four-leaf shinobi got the hidden message behind his words before turning and leaving, Konohamaru switching out with a shadow clone on their way out so he could scout the surrounding area of the village under the henge of a young, adventurous child. Kazekage Mansionao. Kankuro whined as he sat down next to Renji on the couch, an ice pack covering his family jewels and his other hand holding a Kleenex over his broken nose. There were even several bruises covering his face. He had been caught at the last minute in the baths by his sister and Naruko when he had tried to peek into the bath through a small hole he made with a kunai. He had however forgotten that Naruko was a sensory-type shinobi and they had beaten him to a pulp for it. It hurts so much. I warned you that peeping on Naruko was a bad idea, Renji said as he inspected the bruises of his fellow man, having left the bath when the puppet user had started towards the fence. He didn't want her to think that he was peeping on her again. He still didn't know why she thought so the first time. He had been on the other side of the bath asleep from the fence after all. She has a habit of keeping her sensing ability active since we are on the run. Kankuro nodded as he had the memory reinforced by the woman's fist to his balls, glad that she hadn't taken her sword into the bath with her. Tamari sighed with an angry glare as she walked into the living room behind them with Naruko close at her heels, both of them giving glares towards Kankuro. Come on Baka, Tamari said as she grabbed her brother's arm, ignoring his pained groans as her yanking accidentally jostled his broken nose, and yanked him towards the door. Let's get you to the hospital. With that, the two Sand siblings left Renji and Naruko on their own in the living room. Once they were gone, Naruko turned to look at her traveling companion. Do you have everything ready? Yep, the Demi-Jinchuriki chirped as he stood and stretched his tired limbs. We should be able to port over to Tuya today once you are red. Oh shit. Just as the brown-haired boy said that, The alarm seals that were around the Kazekage mansion to warn about intruders went off and they grabbed their weapons before heading towards the door. Intruders, Naruko said as she grabbed her sword from where it was resting on the couch. I can sense 4 people. Renji nodded to her and they rushed outside before jumping to the roof to see if they could find out who was stupid enough to attack the home of the Kazekage, which was literally in the middle of a goddamn shinobi village. Outside the Kazekage mansion. We are going to get hell for this, Udon said with an annoyed look shot towards his excited sensei. The glasses-wearing boy could already envision Tsunade and Gaara's wrath about what they were about to do. There would be nothing left of them. I know. Ebisu groaned with a sigh before he thought of how much he'd be praised by the village's hot chicks for bringing the Jinchuriki home, not really believing Kakashi's tale about his dead last student becoming much stronger. But if you look at the bright side, at least you guys will have your boss back when we take Naruko back to the village. Take who back? A voice called out from above them as Udon was about to argue with his idiotic sensei. Looking up, the 4-leaf ninja noticed standing on top of the roof of the mansion was a very irritated Naruko with Renji right behind her, and her hand was twitching as if she was having a debate to yank her sword out and kick Ebisu's ass. Good to see you, Naruko. Ebisu said as he raised his hand in a mock salute. We are here to take you back to Konoha. Ebisu Uro and the Konohamaru Corps, Naruko said as she looked down at the weak Jounin and his team. Might I ask why you're trespassing on the Kazekage's private property? Oh yes, Udon said as he glared at his sensei with his 2 teammates, though Konohamaru was more focused on his old boss. We are so going to get deep shit for this. We were sent to rescue the Kazekage and retrieve you if you were in Suna by Tsunade-sama. The Jounin boasted, feeling slightly elated that his cage trusted him with saving another cage. Naruko nay. Konohamaru shouted as he brushed past the idiot that led his team. Tsunade Bakan wants you back in the village. She repealed the banishment several years ago and wishes to apologize. I know that she was drunk, but it doesn't matter once her hand signs the paper and she stamps the Hokage seal on it, Naruko said in an annoyed tone. She thought she remembered bashing this into Team 7's heads with her fist and sword back in Taki when they confronted her. I thought you guys would have gotten the message to leave me alone when I beat the shit out of Kakashi-sensei and my old teammates. Konohamaru and his team had the decency to look sheepish, but Ebisu still moved forward opening his mouth, only to be interrupted. As for the bastards in Konoha that snuck that into her paperwork and treated me like trash. I will not walk into a place where 90% of the people there wish to kill me. We're not gonna be able to reason with you into returning with us, are we? Konohamaru asked with a sigh. No, was all she said in response to the young Sarutobi's words. We'd better be ready to fight then, sensei, Moigi said as she took out a pair of tonfa that had blades at the end and she looked at her sensei, who for some reason was acting like he had feathers and he was preening them. Naruko sighed before turning to Renji. Hey, can you deal with Moigi and the baka? Kushios no jutsu. Konohamaru shouted as Renji nodded and slammed his hands into the sand, a ceiling array spreading out on the surface before a cloud of smoke burst out and a man-sized monkey appeared with a wooden bow staff behind its back appeared. You called, Konohamaru Dono? A smirk etched itself across the young Chunin's face and he pulled his own bow staff from a scroll on his hip. Hey there OSU Dono, he addressed his summon. I need your help taking on my old boss. OSU, Udon and I will face Naruko. Konohamaru declared as he looked back at his sensei and Moigi. Moigi-chan, Ebisu-sensei, you capture her companion. Be careful since we don't know anything about him besides that he can teleport like in Kakashi-sensei's report. Let's go, are you ready sensei? Moigi asked as she entered her stance. Let's go, Ebisu snarled as he got his best rape face on, making his students and opponents wonder why he was even a shinobi. Oh great, Renji said with a groan as he dropped down in front of his selected opponents, pulling his new bow staff from his pouch and letting it extend. Another fight, why must everyone be so troublesome, we should all just lay down and sleep. His statement got a tick mark from Moigi, who had gained a hatred of Nara like moaning when babysitting Shikamaru's younger cousins when they were still Jinan. Naruko smirked at her friend's theatrics and pulled her sword from its sheath, making Udon feel a little overwhelmed and inadequate for some reason before she leapt towards the three in front of her. Konohamaru and his summon immediately moved forward to counter her, while Udon jumped back to begin preparations for some of his water-style jutsu. Konohamaru threw several shuriken laced with fire and wind chakra at his former boss, who jumped through them with acrobatic ease before landing on her feet as the shuriken buried themselves in the seal-reinforced walls of the mansion. Art of the Wind Warrior, Thundering Sky Hammer. The girl roared as she swung her sword down like a hammer with wind chakra surrounding it. Osu and Konohamaru managed to jump back in time to watch the ground where they had been shattered and turned into a sandy crater. "Sorry Kono-kun," Naruko said with a smirk at the look of awe on her former minion's face as she appeared behind him and the monkey, forcing them to jump away again from her sword. "But, you're going to have to do better than that. I've faced down tyrants and Jounin-level shinobi, remember?" Konohamaru just grunted in annoyance as Osu ran towards her and he leapt into the air pulling out several kunai that he threw at the whiskered blonde. Naruko held her arm in front of her and let the blades bounce harmlessly off of the bracer, before dodging the strike from the monkey summoned staff as she jumped over him and kicking him in the back to throw the monkey into the wall of the house. She pushed her chakra into the seals on her blade and a smaller blade of chakra than the one in Taki covered it and Konohamaru was forced to dodge while grabbing Udon as the attack devastated the area they had been standing in. "Water style, rushing rapid wave." Udon shouted before a blast of water ripped from the water bottles at his side and crashed into the side of the house as Naruko jumped away to avoid the attack and Osu's own attack from behind. "Earth style, mud dragon." Konohamaru shouted as the mud made from the sand and water mixing took the shape of a dragon's head and opened its mouth to fire large chunks of mud at Naruko. "Art of the Burning Sword, Jukaku Injo." Naruko swung her sword and a large blast of fire erupted from her blade to consume the mud globes and launched them back at Konohamaru and Udon, who dodged them before the flames converged around Osu in the form of a prison. "Sorry Konohamaru Dono," Osu said to get the boy's attention. "But I'm out of energy and I don't think I can get out." Konohamaru nodded to the monkey and allowed him to disappear back to the summoning realm. He was then forced to dodge as his opponent created a Rasengan in her left hand that grew even larger and slammed it down into the sand before him as he barely got away, though Udon wasn't so lucky and ended up being thrown into the side of the house before falling unconscious. Udama Rasengan. Fire style Konohamaru began, only to be cut off as a hand chopped the back of his neck and he fell forward unconscious to reveal Temari and Gaara standing behind him. "Naruko-san, I expect there to be a reason for this." "Hey Gaara-kun," Naruko said with a wave as she noticed Kankuro knocking out Moigi with Renji and the two boys grabbing a hold of the still conscious but badly beaten Ebisu, the man looking like he had been introduced to the inside of a blender. "We were attacked by this Konoha team after Temari left for the hospital with Kankuro-chan." Gaara glared directly at Ebisu as he was brought forward by Renji and Kankuro. "Ebisu-san. Would you like to explain why you are still in my village after I informed you that you and your team were not welcome here, and exactly why you and your team attacked my house?" He roared at the end, scaring the shit out of Kankuro and Temari, while Renji warped behind Naruko to take shelter. Ebisu just sat there, the contents of his bladder streaming down his legs as he lost all ability to speak from the killing intent the Baiju holder was excluding. Gaara sighed as he reined in his temper when the weak-willed Jounin passed out and wrapped Team Konohamaru into the tendrils of his sands before he started levitating on his own sand. "Temari nay, you are in charge until I get back from dropping these idiots off in Konoha. I don't trust them to be alone in the land of wind right now." Temari nodded and grabbed Kankuro to go to their duties, while Gaara looked over at Naruko and Renji. "You two had better be going if you want to meet the others, just in case Konoha had another team around." Renji nodded with a smirk seeing as he already had everything sealed away into scrolls and he grabbed Naruko's shoulder after she said goodbye to her first Jinchuriki friend and they disappeared in a quick distortion. Gaara then sighed as he looked down at the four he was holding tightly. He was going to lay into Tsunade and her council's asses later for such blatant disrespect of other villages. Kanahagakure, 8 hours later. The Konoha 12, the new Junon Team 4 that held the youngest Uzumaki, Kushina, Anko and the others had been gathered and been informed of their mission to capture Naruko by Tsunade after Team Konohamaru had been brought home roughly by a very pissed Gaara, who had torn into her in the council about how they attacked an honored guest in his own house that had left the Sannin with a massive headache as she waited for Ebisu to wake up so she could beat him back into a coma for nearly getting them into a war with Suna, who they were already in tense relations with. After being informed of Naruko's abilities by a newly awakened Team Konohamaru and Team Kakashi, Hinata had left their group claiming to be tired while she really went to train on how to kill with a Naruko mannequin under the supervision of the Hyuga elders, while the younger shinobi left to gather at Choji's family's barbecue bar and the older Jounin and Chunin went their separate ways. Team Konohamaru still in the hospital from their fight with Naruko and Renji. "Everything has gone to hell," Lee said as the 20-year-old youth master stared down at his piece of meat, startling his comrades at his choice of unyouthful language. Neji nodded as he picked up a sake bottle and took a sip. So far, all they had heard was failure after failure to bring their old friend back, and it just meant they were going to be having a harder time when the full team finally made contact with her, especially since they didn't know the skill set of the white-haired girl mentioned by Kakashi, plus Neji had the strange feeling that they weren't the only ones with Naruko. Sasuke just sighed from his seat as he leaned back once his Haruno teammate had stormed off after his usual refusal of dating her. Seriously, you'd think after 10 years of being refused daily would finally get her to stop. But no, she always came back for more. He was beginning to wonder where she got her stubbornness, because he had met her parents once on a mission and they hadn't acted like that at all. "We'll prevail in the end," Shino said from where he was sitting. "We must, for if we cannot save a friend that would have done the same for any of us if the situation was reversed, then we cannot call ourselves shinobi, or true friends." The few that didn't hate Naruko of the Konoha 12 nodded and Choji looked up as he noticed Konohamaru walking up. "Is there something you need, Kono-kun?" the big-boned man asked. "Aren't you supposed to be in the hospital?" "No, not really," the 16-year-old Sarutobi said as he sat down, having left the hospital room after getting tired of his sensei's whining. "I was just tired of listening to Ebisu sensei whine about how he could have defeated Naruko and decided to leave." Everyone nodded at his words. Ebisu already had a low standing position in their eyes, attacking Naruko without proper backup and with his usual arrogance despite being weaker than almost every Jounin and a few Chunin had just made it worse. "I wonder if she would teach me her sword style and attacks when we bring her back," Tenten wondered out loud, though she secretly hoped she wouldn't offend the other girl too much when they came for her. Of course, her musings got raised eyebrows from everyone around the table, making her blush at the fact that she had said that out loud. "I don't see why you guys are so worried about that demonic slut. She could die for all I care," Kiba snapped as he took another piece of meat into his mouth, and almost choked on it when Akamaru barked at him in a reprimanding tone. "Hey! If she were really the demon fox that could lay waste to mountains and create tsunamis with a swing of a single tail, do you think she would have stayed as a young girl that was ridiculed every day since her birth instead of breaking the seal and killing all of us?" Sasuke snapped as he glared at the dog user, wondering how he could be so different from his mother. "You are such a fucking, goddamned idiot. Not one of you, Ino, Sakura and Hinata has a good reason to hate Naruko even if you hate the fox. We're lucky she didn't snap after all the shit she's been through in this village and unleashed the motherfucking demon from its seal. She had the Sandaime, Godime and the two Sannin's favor in just about everything," Kiba growled, angry that he was being talked to like this by his Ninken companion and Sasuke. How bad could her life have been? Every day she was in the academy she was sabotaged by the teachers, and on her third beer the rant was stopped as a gloved hand covered his mouth, making the Uchiha heir look up to see his sensei looking at him tiredly. "As much as I am glad you are coming to her defense against biased fools," Kakashi said as he looked down at his student with his single eye. "That information is classified and I will be forced to take you to Ibiki if you continue." "TCH, Sasuke grunted as he turned back to the table, before pushing off. "I'm too tired to deal with this shit tonight, especially from an overgrown fleabag that can't get over the fact that he was beaten by a fart in the Chunin exams." "Hey," Kiba snapped before he was forced to sit down via Shikamaru's shadows, the young man shivering at the dark look covering the Nara heir's bearded face that just commanded him to shut up. Everyone learning a couple months after Naruko left that it was not a good idea to test the limits that restrained the Nara heir's anger or his father's, especially after Shikaku beat the living hell out of several dozen Chunin with his shadows after getting tired of hearing them badmouth Naruko for what she held. "Before I leave," Sasuke said as he turned a Sharingan-induced glare towards the table. "Let me be clear to all of you that dislike Naruko for some reason or another, after all the shit I have heard come from you guys about how I was crippled and nearly killed after I actually tried to kill her with 2 Chidors through her chest, one of which was enhanced by the second stage of the cursed seal, and had Choji being nearly killed using his family's pills and Neji having a hole blown through his shoulder when fighting the team I joined to leave because I wanted fucking power from a pedophilic bastard who wanted my body. I am more of a demon and traitor than she ever will be." Everyone nodded and decided to leave as well, Ino walking away with her teammates as she thought over what she learned tonight, wondering about if she had been wrong about her fellow blonde and her way of thinking, while Kiba stayed at their table to stew in anger. Unaware that Akamaru had left with Choji as the chubby man walked him to the Inuzuka clan compound, the white-furred Titan dog hating his partner's attitude towards one of the best ear-scratchers he had ever met. Danzo's main route bunker beneath the council chambers. "Do you understand what your mission is, Sai?" Danzo asked as he stared down at the pale-skinned boy kneeling before him through his uncovered eye. "Hi Danzo-sama. I am to place a mind control and submission seal on the Jinchuriki when the team captures it," Sai said as he looked up at his leader. "Good," Danzo said as he felt a bit of pride towards his best shinobi. "Of course, even though it would be good to have the Jinchuriki under our control, if things get too out of hand, I want you to kill her and place a containment seal on her body to keep the demon inside until we can plant it inside the youngest Uzumaki, Menma. After all, he has been training with us to become the host if all fails." "Hi Danzo-sama." Sai muttered as he absorbed that information with interest. He hadn't known that the youngest Uzumaki had been plotting against his sister with Danzo behind everyone's backs. Jiraiya would defiantly be interested in that tidbit of information, along with Tsunade and the girl's mother. "Now then, head to the Hokage Tower. You need to be ready for the mission when they call for the team members. I have heard from Menma that it will be soon if the information he overheard his brother telling their mother is correct. While I have no doubt that the demon will make them work for it, Jiraiya and Kakashi should be able to capture it, but I want you to focus on making sure those seals are placed on the Jinchuriki," Danzo ordered as he went to walk towards the training area to inform his new red-haired student that he needed to be on standby with his Jinan team since the mission would be soon. "Hi Danzo-sama," Sai said and then vanished with a sunshine. Same time, borderline of land of waterfalls and iron. "Hey guys," Naruko said as she and Renji appeared in front of the hotel they had left their belongings at, their trip having taken a little longer than usual due to Renji having to stop to regain his energy. "We're back." Instantly, she felt a small object slam into her side and she looked down to see the hyperactive Shaolin hugging her, while Tuya came out from where she had been eating dango. Following her was a massive dark-skinned man that had a large muscular build only rivaled by his older brother, the Raikage. He also had white hair and a goatee. On his right shoulder was the kanji for iron, showing his seal for the Hachibi. On his left cheek, he had the tattoo of a bull's horn and his top lip had a darker hue than his bottom one. Covering his eyes was a pair of oval-shaped sunglasses and white forehead protector that was bound around his head that matched his Kumagakure Jounin flak jacket. Yo, Miss Nine. The man bellowed, "How's you doing 9-0, it's been a long time oh." Following behind him with a sigh and a tired look as she grasped her nose was a 32-year-old woman with long, straight, blonde hair that was bound in bandages and dark eyes. She was wearing a short-sleeved black and purple blouse with black pants that had cloud designs on them, purple fingerless gloves and a chain of blue beads wound around her left hand. Around her forehead was the Kumo Hittite. "Hey Naruko-chan, ignore the baka," the woman said as she resisted the urge to smack her teacher upside the head. "He's been rapping the entire time we have been here." "Hello Yugito Nichan, B-sensei," Naruko said as she hugged the two Jinchuriki, making the dark-skinned man smile at his two daughter figures. "Sorry Renji and I were late," she said as she looked at the two standing before her. "But the Akatsuki was attacking Gaara-kun and we went to save him." Yugito nodded to her fellow blonde's words. "We know, Tuya-chan filled us in when we arrived, so where are we going to go?" "Uzushio is the only good place besides the turtle to practice Baijuu training." Naruko nodded at the older woman's words, Yes Yugito-ne, we plan on heading over to Uzushio, and we need to do it quickly. She said, getting curious looks from her two teachers. Konoha located me when I was escorting Tazuna Gigi to the new Fire Daimyo's palace and they have been chasing me. So far I have fought my old team and Konomaru's squad. Killer Bee nodded as he took a serious look and looked off into the air, probably searching to make sure that there were no other squads than Samui's around, the buxom blonde having decided to wait until Naruko arrived before leaving her sensei and best friend alone. Well, we min as well get a move in Ms. 9, Bee said. The only teams around right now is Samui-chan's and an Iwa team, plus we'll want to get to Uzu quickly if we want to master the last two stages of Kurama's cloak in time. Naruko nodded along with Tuya and Renji, while Shaolin stood at rapt attention to make sure they weren't attacked, the little white-haired girl believing that the two Kumo ninjas was a god and goddess too due to having the same burden as her goddess. Alright then, guys, Naruko said as she straightened her sword and helped Tuya finish sealing the dengo she ordered while waiting for their return into a couple scrolls in Renji's pouch. Let's go. 2 days later, Hokage Tower. The retrieval team was gathered in the Anbu briefing room of the Hokage Tower that had been made for utterly top-secret information, with Tsunade and Jiraiya standing before them, truly utter serious looks on their faces. Tsunade was the one to speak first. Just yesterday, a member of Jiraiya's spy network managed to catch sight of Naruko moving through a port town in the Land of Waves with the two people in Kakashi and Team Konohamaru's reports. However, they were also accompanied by a redhead that we believe was originally a part of Orochimaru's old bodyguards. The sound for that the Sasuke retrieval team fought, Tsunade said, catching Shikamaru's immediate attention due to having been the one to fight against the person his leader spoke of. Besides the girl, there were two others covered in dark brown traveling cloaks that hid their faces from the sight of our informant. He reported that they bought some supplies before buying a boat from the former Gato shipping industry and they sailed out into the ocean to the north of Wave. And as we all know, the only place north of Wave in any form of islands is the lost home of the Uzumaki clan. Uzushio Gakure, Jiraiya said, and he looked over at Kushina to see her going pale and covering her mouth with her hands as tears came out at the mention of her daughter traveling towards the ruins of her birthplace. What's the deal with this Uzushio Gakure? Tenten asked the question, going through the minds of the younger members of the retrieval team once she noticed Kushina's expression. It's an island and was a minor shinobi village that was once an ally of Konoha before the fall of Uzushio in the Second Shinobi War. Jiraiya said before adding, it was the original home of the Uzumaki clan before it was attacked by the Union of Kumo, Iwa and Kiri in an attempt to weaken Konoha back in the war. Most of the surviving members of the clan were scattered around the elemental nations, while Kushina, the princess of the clan, was sent here to become the second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi under the watch of Mito Uzumaki, Tsunade's grandmother. We're getting off topic. Tsunade snapped, interrupting the Sannin, her voice sounding like she didn't want to talk about her grandmother, only Jiraiya and Kushina understanding since they knew she had a strained relationship with the woman. The fact is that we don't know much about the island since Kushina came as a young girl and it has been 43 years since the village fell. It is to be assumed that Naruko knows more about it since she has probably already been there. Tsunade said as she paused to look at all of the team. I know I don't have to express the seriousness of the fact that we don't know much of anything about the island, along with the fact that it could have been changed in the years that it has been dormant since no one has been there, besides, as we assume, Naruko and her comrades. The entire team understood what she meant. A major advantage to have in a battle was to know the environment you were fighting in. If a shinobi knew the field, then they could fight better and maybe use it against their enemy, because if they didn't, then they would already be caught in the traps the enemy had set up beforehand. It was even more crucial when a shinobi was taking on a retrieval mission so that way the hunter wouldn't become the hunted. Besides being prepared for anything when faced with Naruko and the island, we must also be prepared in the event that the Akatsuki shows, since the news that Naruko is out and about will most likely have reached their ears already. Jiraiya said as he looked around at the serious faces of the retrieval team, taking note of the dark plans in Menma's eyes at defeating his sister. He would be keeping an eye on the Jinan, especially after Sai informed him and Tsunade that Menma had been training under Danzo to become the next Jinchuriki. Either way, we won't have a better chance than this, so don't do anything half-assed. Tsunade said after the whispering between the team members stopped and she took her eyes from Menma, like Jiraiya having been told by Sai what the redhead had been up to. Jiraiya is in charge of the team as originally planned while Kakashi and Ibiki act as his second-in-commands. Jiraiya and Kakashi along with Tenzo, Kushina and Kenji are the only ones with the best chances of subduing Naruko without causing too much damage. Also, in the event that either or all of them are killed, anyone below the rank of Jounin is to disengage and fall back. Is that understood? Hi. Everyone said in return. Large hidden cove on the northern side of Uzushio. Welcome, Naruko said as she stepped out of their boat with her arms stretched out dramatically. To New Uzushio Gakure, the home of the Uzumaki clan and everyone that has been mistreated. There behind her, much to her comrades' amazement, was a massive village with walls made of stone embedded into the very rock of the cliff it was in front of. It was at least the size of Konoha and looked to only have one gate. As they got closer, the group of four could see that there were still several buildings being built by large cranes and work crews that bore the emblem of Wave Country and Spring Country. Wow, Renji said as he looked up at the gate as they passed below it, noticing the crimson swirl of the Uzumaki clan symbol right above the gates. You built all of this when you were here last time? Ha ha ha, Naruko chuckled as she saw the looks of astonishment on her comrades' faces. I decided to build a new Uzushio after I buried the bodies in the old one and learned about my clan, so I talked to Tazuna Gigi and Koyuki-chan about it and they agreed to help me. As long as I ally the village and us with them. That would also mean Kumo, she added once she saw Yugito looking at her. I can't forget to add my dear Nei-chan and B-sensei, now can I? Or that big Ophi. Killer Bee nodded and was about to rap something out about his feelings before Yugito hit him in the gut, knocking the wind out of his metaphoric sails. Tuya just hugged Naruko, saying thank you over and over again at the sight of her parents' home being rebuilt. Naruko smiled as she patted the top of the redhead's head and hugged her cousin back, before pulling a teary Shaolin in as well. Well, Renji said as he stared up at the towering buildings. I guess I'll be able to have that world where I can just nap now. Of course you would say that, Baka, Tuya said as she smacked him over the head. So what are we going to do now? She asked, getting the younger blonde's attention. What do you mean? We still have to worry about your and probably Renji's training. Then there is the fact that Konoha and most likely Akatsuki will be coming after you soon since you were spotted. The flute-using redhead said as she turned to look at the blonde that had saved her from death under the fallen trees that Tamari had dumped on her, remembering the odd feeling that she was being watched by the old man that was reading Icha Icha on the docks when they bought the boat to sail out in. We'll worry about them when they get here, he said, taking a serious tone as he too thought about the annoying leaf shinobi that were sure to be coming after Naruko soon to take her back. At the most, Yugi-chan and I can most likely request a team of Kumo shinobi to come down here for extra help, but with how long it took us to get here ourselves, it would take a while. Naruko nodded at his words. We might want to, especially if Akatsuki is coming. Renji and I already fought two of their members and I fought one a couple years ago when they tried to take Fu, and I know that they live up to their titles as S-class shinobi. Yugito nodded, remembering her own run-in with one called Hidan after a corrupt member of the Shinobi Council in Kumo had sold her out to the Jashin-crazed man, only surviving due to Samui, Daru and Be getting there in time to stop the strange man from finishing whatever ritual he had planned for her and took her to get healed before having the Raikage execute the traitor. I'll send out the message then, the host of the Nekomata said as she looked to Be and Naruko. Be can start you on your training, especially since he is the only one of us that can hope to subdue you and Kurama if you guys go berserk. The four in front of her nodded, before Naruko and Renji left with Bee to head to a large training ground that the blonde had made by digging out a large cave in the center of the island the last time she was here and practicing with Kurama's chakra. Shaolin left to go check on the Uzukage's office that Naruko gave her directions to, while Tuya left to find a quiet place to prepare for the most likely coming attack and maybe practice on her flute for a bit. Tallest tower in Amigakure. Pain-sama, Madara-sama, Zetsu said as he came up from the ground behind them, gaining the attention of the masked man and the self-proclaimed god. Yes. What is it, Zetsu? Pain asked without turning from his spot overlooking the village of Ame. Konoha has spotted the Jinchuriki of the Kyubi buying a boat and wave with 5 others. She is headed toward Uzushio. That got Payne's attention as he snapped his head around at the mention of his clan's homeland, before he schooled his features, chewing himself out at showing emotion in front of Madara and Zetsu. Good. Now we know where to begin. Call the Akatsuki together, we are going after the Kyuubi immediately. Hi, Pain-sama, Zetsu said, before making eye contact with Madara and giving a nod as he sunk into the ground. Jokaku and Jo means Fortress Blaze and is another attack from Genri Yusai's Rujin Jaka. Also, since I kind of went over the Shippuden age by giving Shikamaru a beard and all that, I decided to explain the Konoha 12's appearances, except Tenten, Neji, Sai, Shino, and Lee, they look the same. Kiba has a wild goatee that spreads across his jaw like Asuma's own and his hair is slicked back and reaches down to the back of his neck. Dear YouTube family, this concludes today's content. Please subscribe to my channel for further updates. Warm regards. Anime Octopus.